All right. So our next conversation is going to be with the veteran journalist, a seasoned editor, who some 10 days ago, the Saturday Nation published an article that she had written. One of the many that, she has written and edited many stories, not many about her own personal self and her own personal life. Dorothy Kweyu, a seasoned journalist, is our guest. She's here to tell us about that story that she wrote in the Saturday Nation of the 10th of March, which is about her son, Stephen Bertrand Munyako, who is in Saudi Arabia. Dorothy, good morning.
Thank you so much.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Dorothy Kweyu, as you have been told.
Yes.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
To welcome you to the conversation, CT has the day's proverb. Every week, CT goes to one African country. He picks proverbs from that country, and then he brings us one proverb a day. This week, where are you, CT?
We're in the Republic of Burundi.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, Dorothy, listen to the proverb, and then you'll give us your own interpretation of that proverb.
Okay, thank you.
Don't tell more fairy tales when the child has gone to sleep.
Don't tell more fairy tales when the child has gone to sleep.
Never heard of that one. But it makes sense because when the child has gone to sleep, who is listening?
You have no audience. What do you think the proverb is saying?
Say it when they are listeners. Yeah. Say it when there's somebody to listen. If it's a fairy tale, then let the children be awake.
Say it when you have an audience.
Yes.
At the appropriate time.
Yes.
Say things at the appropriate time.
Yes.
Right? Don't say things when, well, it's least appropriate. So sasa unatuambia tufanye nini?
Okay, ushatuambia. Sasa unataka tufanyeje?
Tukuchinjie mbuzi.
Wow.
Ama tukuimbie.
Unataka tukuimbie sasa. Sasa unataka. Dorothy, this story that you wrote, and it was published in The Nation, is basically talking about your son.
Yes.
Start the story from the beginning. Assume we did not read the article.
Assuming you did not read this story, this story starts on 12th April 2011. Yeah, it was a Tuesday. It was about 8 a.m. and it was breaking news that had happened about 3 days earlier. It was about my firstborn, and my first cousin called to tell me that Steve fought with a workmate and he's dead. You notice the ambiguity. He's dead.
Steve fought with a workmate and he's dead.
So, my first reaction, if she was telling me, was that it was Steve who was dead.
Yeah, naturally. Yeah.
And, of course, I did what every mother would do at that time, or any close family member. And, of course, the whole family broke out into wailing. Yeah. We were living on Cody Road, Nairobi West, and we were in wailing until around 11 a.m. when one of the children was told that actually it's not Steve who is dead, it's the workmate. And things got from bad to worse, because knowing that he was in Saudi Arabia and all the horror tales I had about Saudi Arabia, I knew we are talking about a situation where my son's goose was literally cooked. Yeah. So I knew that I only saw darkness ahead.
Even despite the good news that he's alive.
Yes, I saw darkness ahead because I knew that the next thing, in fact, in my heart I said, look, this is double jeopardy. If my son had died, he had died. I would have brought him home. But if my son has killed, then the next is going to be come and take your beheaded son, because I knew that if he had killed somebody, then the only option for him is execution. And I was actually, I can't describe to you my mind at that time. It was the most difficult situation in my life, and it was compounding a situation that happened 3 days earlier, because as a family we had just lost a daughter-in-law, and we were preparing for her burial in a few. So there I was. I didn't know whether I was mourning Shiro. I didn't know whether I was mourning Steve. I was lost. Yeah.
Let me take you back a bit. How did Steve end up in Saudi Arabia? What was he doing there?
Okay. In 1996, he was approached. Steve was approached for a job in Saudi Arabia. I'd finished his Form 4 in Nyangori High School, and I saw him as following in my nyayo, because I was running an organization at that time called Interlink Rural Information Service, and at one time when I was given an assignment to do a story on cook stoves, and I told him to do it for a U.S. agency, I can't even remember the name. I sent him to the field, and he came up with a fantastic story. I didn't even need to edit it. So I knew Steve's future was in journalism. But when he did his Form 4, he was not, although he got a C+, he was not straight entry material, because, like me, he was weak in maths. Yeah. So, unlike his siblings, he didn't get direct entry into our universities. So, when this opportunity came, I said, okay, let him go. And we actually discussed. I told Steve, why don't you then take this opportunity and make some money, and you can go either to the UK or to the US to pursue your dream, because he suddenly also had seen his potential in journalism. And he was a very good actor. He was in the school's drama club at Nyangori High School where he was. So that was the reason.
What was this opportunity? What was the opportunity?
The opportunity was to work and make money.
In Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so that he used that money for further studies.
Okay. So he took it?
Yes, he took it.
And he went to Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
And
very
he was
legally.
there for many years?
Yeah, very legally. Yeah. And he had his documentation correct. As I speak, he still has his ICAMA, which is like the national ID or whatever, whether it is the resident permit, but he has his documents legal.
Okay.
And he worked for one employer until the time of the tragedy. Yeah, he was a warehouse manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once you now started processing the news, and it was clear that, well, Steve is alive, but he was involved in an altercation, and somebody else is dead. Of course, the next thing is now you want to find out the details.
Yes, and my first reaction was that immediately we finish with the burial of Shiro, I'm going to travel to Saudi Arabia. And I thought it was going to be the easiest thing. Yeah, I told everybody, right now, it's Shiro. We are going to lay her to rest. After that, I'm going to Foreign Affairs to assist me, you know, because this is an emergency and I want to go and find out what next. First of all, my first thought was to see my son. Secondly, I wanted to see the widow. And it came to pass that none of them passed. I couldn't see my son. I couldn't see the widow. The processing was like, you know.
Can you explain that a little bit? So you actually did go to Saudi Arabia?
I didn't go.
You did not go?
I did not go.
Okay.
And the reason was that I was later explained by the embassy that right now the emotions are so, you know, it's not the right time to go.
Okay.
It's not the right time to go and see the widow, you know. Yeah, because the emotions are still very raw.
Yeah.
So you will not be a welcome visitor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you know by then I mean, from what you say, information was scarce. What did you know at that point that had actually happened, detail to detail? We know you could not go, but you had this little bit of information. What else did you know about the situation?
Yeah, the little bit that of information that came through, because Stephen managed to talk to me while he was still at the police station. Yeah, and he was just normal. He wasn't hysterical or anything. By the way, he's a very calm person. If Steve called now and you were to listen to him, you'd be surprised that he's an inmate. He's the coolest person. Very calm demeanor and so on. So he said, okay, he ajali ilitokea, and it's like they were friends. Let's face it, they were friends. He and the late were friends. And but they differed on some matter, and they got into a scuffle, and the way I understood is that his friend crossed the border. Yeah, he crossed the border. But we don't want to blame the dead, you know, because he's not here to defend himself. So please allow me not to go into the details of what happened. The fact is that the fight was fought, and according to what Steve said, he took his friend took the mail opener, because it was in his friend's office, stabbed him in the thigh and in the thumb, and of course, when you are attacked, you defend yourself. So he snatched it, you know, he snatched it and stabbed back. Unfortunately, he stabbed him in the chest. Now, listen to this. The ambassador at that time, can't remember the name, when he came, and all of them, I know all the ambassadors who have managed this case, when he came, I was called to Foreign Affairs, and we were given a room, and he briefed me on my son. And he said, Mama Steve did not go out of his way to kill his colleague. The fact is that the late walked himself to hospital. And the fact that he's dead, ni shauri ya Mungu. And I can assure you that if it was in Europe or another cold country, he wouldn't have died. I think he overbled. So when October came, see, the accident happened in April. When October came, the case was heard. And happily, at that time, he was convicted for manslaughter. He was to serve 5 years. But I was happy prematurely, because shortly after, I learned that the bereaved family had appealed in the Sharia court. And there are two options. Either to have Steve executed, or to have what they call blood money, compensation. And I hear it is huge money, ranges from 5 million Saudi Arabia riyals to 10 million. And because the Saudis are an oil economy, my son tells me that they pay that money quickly, in an evening, in a day, you know. So, but if you are talking of 4 million Saudi Arabia riyals, you are talking of 400 million Kenya shillings. It's not the money I'll see in my life. I'm 73. I don't think I'm going to see that money anytime, any soon, especially in my profession.
So was that the verdict of the Sharia court in the appeal?
No, actually, the Sharia court had two options. Yeah, and the family took the execution option. Yeah.
So they did not even want the blood money?
They did not want, and that was for the longest time. It is only 3 years ago, and after a miracle visit, I call it a miracle visit, by an embassy official.
A Kenyan embassy official?
Yes, yeah. Who was sent there because she was a lady, and who, together with the wife of the joint boss of Steve and the late, went to visit the widow.
How many years ago?
3.
They went to see the widow about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so this is 2021.
that was the first
10
time.
years after
Yes.
the death.
Yes. In between, she never entertained any language of forgiveness, blood money. It was no. So when these people went, and I don't know the magic they used. But after that, the story changed. They were now ready for blood money, but it was not to be an immediate solution because the family was divided. Apparently, the widow was not alone. There were those also who believed that they're not going to take any money. It's going to be execution.
A life for a life.
Yeah. So that process started 3 years ago, and the Kenya government officials, that is the embassy, because they are represented by embassy, and the Ministry of Interior of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia got into discussions with the family. And I think it was treacherous because 3 years is not small. And thanks be to God, I've been kept posted on the process. And they discussed from that 10 million Saudi Arabia reals until last November, when they finally gave me an official communication that the money had now come down after those negotiations to 3.5 million, which is roughly 150 million Kenya shillings. It's still a lot of money, and I believe that is why I'm here, to tell you about it, and hopefully to be allowed to share the methods by which fellow Kenyans might help me to bring back my son, because I know my son was a victim of circumstances, in the sense that if he was in a different jurisdiction, it was a straightforward manslaughter case.
Okay. So he was convicted of manslaughter.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Initially.
Yes.
And initially sentenced to 5 years
Yes.
in jail.
And which would have been just 2.5, because apparently, even in Saudi, they operate like us, that day and night count as 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he'd have been home
He would have been home long ago, would have forgotten.
by the end of 2013, 2014.
Yep.
But then the family went to appeal
Yes.
in the Sharia court, and
And in June 2014, that is when we got the impossible news that Steve was out
to be
for
execution. So between 2014 and 2021, what was happening?
We were
Within
there.
this time,
We were there in limbo.
He's already been sentenced to execution. So in those years, what was happening?
I think one of the saving graces, and which made it impossible to execute Steve instantly, was that one of the children was a minor. And apparently, in as much as I'm not extremely conversant with the Sharia law, if there is that kind of situation, you have to wait until the minor is 18 years or of age.
One of whose children?
Yes.
Whose child?
Of
one
the
of the
widow.
convicts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or one of the
Okay.
widow's
One of
children.
the children was mine. I think 2, but one was very young. One was very young and needed to be 18.
Before what? Just explain that a little bit. Yeah.
So that they now agree collectively on whether
On the punishment.
on the punishment. They should have a say on whether the killer of their father is to be executed or whether they can have blood money.
I see.
Yeah.
So are we looking at a situation now where that minor has attained the age of 18?
I think it should be close to there, but now it has been overtaken, because there is also the option that if the family agrees, especially the mother, they go with the decision of the mother, if it is blood money. But if it's execution, it seems like the Sharia law does not take it lightly. They want to give everybody a chance, to give this human being a chance to live.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we speak now, where is Steve?
Where is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is at Shimezi prison in Mecca. Yes.
Have you ever managed to visit him?
I've never
13
managed to
years.
go because each time I tried, and there was a time I was going to go there with my son Cyprian, who is actually very central in the process of trying to get Steve back. He lost his ticket because it expired, We ran, we thought a chance had finally come. And the embassy was very conducive. The ministry wrote a letter to the embassy of Saudi Arabia in Muthaiga. It's actually very close to Muthaiga police station. And I was a constant presence there waiting for my visa. It never happened because later they told me they also want to get in touch with the deceased's family. He was from Yemen, so that they involve him. They involved them in the process. And I visited so many times that in the end the ticket expired, and my son got a few coins back. Me, thank God, my daughter works with the airlines, so I was to travel on a rebate ticket. Yeah, so the ticket expired and just gave up.
Let's take a break.
Thanks be to God that especially since he was moved to Shimezi, he was in different jails. He has been a state visitor in different jails. But where he is now, it's possible for them to call. And it is legal. They have a phone in the corridor and they have queues. Everybody has their 5 minutes. And if you want to talk long to your family, you can negotiate with your colleagues to award you minutes. And we'll pay back the minutes. And this is jointly paid by the king. He mentions the king. If it's a government arrangement, fine. But the king helps every inmate to be able to talk to their family.
Okay.
So he talks quite frequently. Yesterday he tried, I got a message that Steve is trying to reach you, but I was in a meeting whereby I had switched off the phone.
Okay, so let's take a break. We'll continue the conversation.
So that is great news, because when you are talking to him, as I said before, you won't believe Steve is an inmate. He talks, he cracks his jokes.
He's lively.
He's lively.
Dorothy Kweyu is a seasoned journalist, a freelance writer and editor. And about 10 days ago, his story was published in The Nation, and that's why we are here today. He's telling us about his son, Stephen Bertrand Munyako, who in April 2011, was involved in an altercation with a co-worker in Saudi Arabia. The co-worker ended up dead. Steve was taken to court. He was charged. He was convicted of manslaughter, but the family appealed. And in the Sharia court, the family went with one of the two options given to them, either execution or accept blood money, which is basically a fine to be determined by the family. The family opted for execution until 2023, when this was revised, and now it's about 3.5 million riyals. That's the blood money that the family is asking for. That translates to about 150 million shillings. And you're saying in all those years since 2011, even before, you have not seen Steve face to face?
Before, yes. He used to come home.
Okay.
Yeah. Whenever he got leave, and that is as frequently as they would release him, he came. His last visit was when we were living in Nairobi West at Gator Close. Yeah.
How old is he now?
Steve
He's your firstborn.
turned 50 on the 5th of this month. This tragedy struck when he had just celebrated his 37th birthday. So you can imagine the prime of his life has been spent behind bars.
City.
The tragedy strikes at the most inopportune times. Someone goes to a country to seek opportunities and to do well for himself. A disagreement with a friend ends up in the friend dying. And the very thing that had taken Steve to Saudi suddenly just vanishes into smoke. But one has to be grateful that he's alive. So long as one is alive, there's always hope. And so long as there's hope, one can always make changes. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because in a situation like the one our colleague and friend Dorothy finds herself in, for a parent, nothing could be more difficult. A child is in distress. I don't think there's a greater pain that a parent would feel more than that. And you are far away and you're limited as to what you can do. Perhaps the best thing you can do is pray. And in this case, it is clear that those prayers have been answered. Because once someone's life is restored and you're now talking about money, well, you've now entered the realm of miracles, because everything we're talking about here is not within easy reach. 13 years down the line, 13 years is a long time.
It is a long time.
It's a very long time. Did Steve have a family?
Did Steve
have a family?
Is he married?
Steve is a father of 3. Yeah. He's a father of 3.
How old are they?
A girl and 2 boys. One of the boys I live with him, he's called Evans. He was very young when it happened. I think he was the most devastated, because whenever the dad came, they were like this. You know? And I think he resembles the dad most. So, when he saw the father not coming, and this limit to what you can explain a little boy, he said, the next time dad comes, I'll hold on to his jacket and we'll board the plane together. It has not happened, you know. But he's now grown up. He turned 23. He's a completing student at Eastlands College of Technology, which is a baby of Strathmore Foundation. And I've worked with him all along. Same with Ian. And Ian is now got a job in Kitengela. And the sister, that one I didn't have much control over, because Steve kept that as his secret. I learned much later, and I was very sad that I was not able to take control of that particular child. Okay? Shall we leave it at that?
Yes,
he's a family man.
Yes, we shall leave it at that, yes.
Okay.
That is a good place to leave it, yes.
So things progressed, and I want to go back just a little bit, because the spot at which everything is today is that the blood money option is what is being addressed.
Yes, now.
And this is because the widow of the deceased has said, okay, let's stay away from the execution option and let's go for blood money.
Yes.
You saw that as a miracle, kind
I
of.
saw it. I prayed so many times, I prayed so many times. I don't know how many times I told God, my sister Nadia is hurting, for that is the widow's name. She's hurting. I know what she's feeling, but my son's life will not restore her husband. Please soften her heart to allow my son to return. That was my daily prayer. Now the prayer has changed. I'm praying for the money. And money and life are different. Money, silver and gold belong to God. Cattle on 1,000 hills belong to God. But life also belongs to him. But for us here on earth, we love that human warmth. I wish to embrace my son again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now with that option, time. Time is an issue.
Time.
It must be an issue.
Time is of the essence.
So what are we talking about? Because I would want to imagine. I imagine that it's not, well, okay, we'll do the blood money and you have however long you need to get it and bring it. Is it stipulated by time?
It is stipulated, and we are praying that there will be an extension if we will not have received the money
How long
by
do you
that
have?
time, because from November it was 6 months. Now we are talking of 2 months, because the period ends on 15th of May. Yeah, so we are just slightly less than 2 months. And it took a while, because when these options were communicated, it was a government-to-government letter, and getting a direct letter that would allow me to mobilize fundraising, there are rules and regulations on how you can fundraise, especially on this amount of money. It's not like a funeral which you can handle within a week, you are done, This is huge money. So that option just came about a month ago, and it was like snail space. People have come out, yes, and I really want to thank each and everyone who has contributed something. But it was only when I went public, and it was really not my decision. I'm very media shy, let me tell you. I've interviewed people before, including before television. But I'm very media shy. So when I invited a colleague, he's now the editorial lead of weekend publications at Nation, I invited him to be on the wall, to be one of the contributors. He took a while to come back and said, would you like us to write something? And I said, look, I don't want the drama that goes with media. I'm a media person, but I didn't want all the ugly words that you have said about the Saudis. I'm saying so because if it were not for the cooperation of the Saudis, the Saudi government, and the Kenya embassy in Saudi Arabia, I don't know. Because it was that visit by this young woman and the wife of the joint boss of Steve and the late that my prayer, my many years prayer for God to soften the widow's heart would not have happened. So I know that there's another side to the Saudis. They are human beings first and foremost. So I didn't want anything that might cause hurt, because surely we have helped this woman. How can she allow that kind of story to be published about us? So I was very concerned about what comes out. And the editor graciously said, what about if we asked you to write it yourself? And I've written all my life. So I sat down and wrote the story. He was actually talking to me on the SGR. I was coming from Mombasa. I said, okay, let's get to Nairobi. And the following day, I gave him the story. That is the story that many of you read. Yeah. The only thing is that, again, in my incorrigible shyness, believe you me, I'm quite shy. It was foolhardy, or maybe false modesty. I didn't put the contacts where people might reach, but the outpouring has been much. My email address was there, and I spent Sunday well past midnight just responding to the emails. We are touched, but we didn't give us the payment instructions. What do we do, So that was a big omission, which I'm praying that Spice will remedy for me, that we can reach out to fellow Kenyans to assist me in this, because there are many good people out there. They are sending in money, and I can tell you that what we raised in 3 weeks, we raised the same amount in 1 week after the publication. So I'm seeing more from this occasion, and I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity to talk about my son.
You spoke about various groups that have come in to support you and to help.
Yes.
Like the diaspora in Saudi Arabia has contributed. Of course, your family and friends have contributed.
Yes.
Since then, you've seen members of the public contributing.
Yes.
How are they contributing?
There is an M-Pesa. We have got an official pay bill. Now I'm learning a lot about our country. Yeah, it's not easy. It has to be vetted by the CAK. Yeah, I didn't know that. So we finally got an official CAK approved M-Pesa pay bill.
What's the number?
Okay, so that pay bill is 805-6675. 805-6675. The account would be your name. That's the pay bill.
Okay. 805-6675. Right? And how far have you raised? How much have you raised so far? Your target is at least 150 million shillings, going by today's exchange rate. All right?
According to what I saw, we had passed the 700,000 mark, and we are still very far. We are at, if you add the money that was raised earlier in Saudi, we are talking of just about 2% of what we need. So in terms of the ultimate goal, we are pretty far, yeah? And it is my prayer that now that the number is out there, more people of goodwill will join this campaign to bring back Steve. Yeah.
What scares you, Dorothy?
What?
What scares you?
The continued stay of my son in there and the damage, the toll it is taking or has taken on the children. You know, me, I'm a grown-up, you know, even though my friends think I also need some psychological care, you know, because they don't understand how I kept this. But how could I talk when it was all darkness ahead?
But the answer to that actually lies in what you just told us. When somebody has faith and somebody believes that there's a God who actually answers prayers, you cannot actually get better support than that. Because even when everything is dim and dark and you can't actually, and dreary, and you actually can't see your way out, something tells you, no, there is a way out. It may be beyond me, but there is a way out. And that keeps you going. Because in all honesty, everything you've said is completely out of the ordinary. There's nothing usual about it. There's nothing normal about these circumstances. And when you're looking at the amounts that we're talking about,
yes,
it is a colossal amount by any standards.
Yep.
But you know, the word miracles exists for a reason. And they exist because they've happened. If they had never happened, then there'd be no mention of the word miracle. Sometimes help comes from the most unusual sources. And you get reprieve from places you had not even considered. That's where, again, the word miracle comes into play. What we've seen over time, even in this studio, and things we've discussed, when we've seen situations where Kenyans have been in distress, what constantly surprises us, and I say surprise because you think you've understood the depth to which people will go and the extent to which people will go to assist, it surpasses your expectations. So you look and you say, oh, I see. Despite the issues that we have in this country, we keep getting surprised at how Kenyans rally. We keep getting surprised. We genuinely get surprised. But I wouldn't lose hope. 700,000 shillings is a lot of money. It is infinitely more than 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
But remember that was multiplied, and what we are banking on as a family is on the strength of networks. You know, that tell a friend to tell a friend that there is this need. And Kenyans are extremely generous people. I've received emails from total strangers. And that's why they sent email, because if they knew me, they would have called me.
Yep.
I've got calls from family, friends whom we have not talked in a long time. And some of them were even said to be ailing. They picked phones. What have we had? You know, they are all frightened. But you have mentioned God. God does not sleep. When this news broke out about the execution, I was actually visiting with my husband, God rest his soul, in Taiwan. And he was at that time in charge of the international church, because in Taiwan, only 5% is Christian. And he was in charge at that particular time. It was a rotating duty. And he mobilized all his friends on email for 40 days of prayer and fasting. That is what the Reverend Augustine Chingwala Msopole did, you know. And he loved to say in his life that that was an answer to a forgotten prayer, you know. For me, it became almost a forgotten prayer, you know. And I wish he was around to see this new process. He would be so excited because he would recall the time when he mobilized his friends for 40 days of prayer and fasting for Steve, you know. So prayer has been central to this whole thing. And miracles do happen.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
They do. If there's one thing that hasn't been extinguished yet, is the occurrence of miracles. The thing about tragedy is it, among other things, it awakens people to certain realities of life that we don't encounter on a daily basis. And it awakens things in people that even they themselves had forgotten actually exists.
Yes.
Because we all wake up with this idea that we have very many problems. And then you hear of someone else's problems and you realize you actually don't have problems. You don't have problems at all. If anything, you have a lot to be grateful for. You know, we're talking about raising money in Kenya among the diaspora. Even in Saudi, I am certain, forget the diaspora, there'll probably be people in that very, very country who will hear of Steve's case and who will want to help. Why do I say this? How often do you hear of a case of someone who's not a Saudi in Saudi has a case, someone died, they're in jail, and they've been there for 13 years. How often do you hear of such a case? It isn't often.
It doesn't. It's not often.
So even in that country, it is something that will be news. And it may seem to be torturous, but when something takes time and it isn't forgotten, it affords an opportunity for the matter to be looked at again and again and again, and for people to look and say, okay, now surely, how else could this thing have been handled? And you've given proof to that, because there was a time the widow could not be spoken to. A time came, it took time, yes, but she listened. And the family listened. Your prayer that their hearts would be softened was heard, and their hearts were softened. There are those who argue that time heals all things. I would say it heals many things, not all, but it heals quite
a good number of things.
A good number of things, yes.
Right. Again, that pay bill number is 805-6675, 805-6675. The account name, you can put in your name and you can contribute whatever amount. You know, it doesn't matter. And we've got a message here for you from Advocate Ndegwanjiro, who says he's supporting and he's already sent his support to the number. And many others are also doing the same. Dorothy, there's something that you've mentioned a number of times here, and I think it's important that we amplify it.
Yes.
The support that you've received from the Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Yes.
And the Embassy of Kenya in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Say it again. What kind of support have they extended to you?
I think the support that I've received from the embassy is escalating. The moment the matter was escalated to the highest office in the land here, obviously it went to where it belonged, in Riyadh, our embassy in Riyadh. And they took it on, you know, and there is an officer who, in his acting capacity, embraced this as his personal mission. And he would call anytime and say, Mama Steve, you know, he's now retired. Yeah. I think he's in Northeastern. He has been quiet lately. I said, hey, Your Excellency,
Where did you go?
You have been quiet, you know. And he called immediately. He said, look, sio kwa ubaya. Can you talk to so and so and so and so? He's directing me where I should go and tell them Ibrahim has said this, you know.
Yeah.
And Ibrahim is a rare gem. He is the one who mobilized the community in Saudi Arabia to fundraise.
Right.
You know, 2.2 million in an evening is awesome.
Substantial.
Yeah.
That's substantial.
That's,
Ibrahim, thank you very much. And Dorothy, thank you for coming and speaking to us again and telling us the story, your journey, 13 years seeking to get your son back home. Stephen Bertrand Munyako is the firstborn of Dorothy Kweyu. She's a veteran journalist. How old are you again?
I turned 73 on February 6th.
Yeah, she's been practicing journalism for all my life.
45 years.
There you go. Thank you very much for joining us, Dorothy. Again, the number as we close, 805-6675. If you find it within your heart, you can support Dorothy.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.